this session. Okay. All right. Very good evening to all of you, Poha. Good evening to you. Great that you could join us upon returning from school. That's really amazing. Thank you very much for your dedication. So, for the rest of us who might be watching the recording, so this is a session which we hold once in 2 weeks. And, it's really bringing you to the basics of what meditation is all about. Excuse me. Yeah, as I said, this is really bringing you to the basics of what meditation is all about. What's mind control all about? What do you mean by, reconnecting with our deeper self, right? So we go really deep into these concepts. And essentially, we are just sharing with you the real essence. And in the hope that, as you attend these sessions in future, you will begin to learn more and more about what ancient wisdom is speaking about these topics, right? So, in the past few weeks, we have concluded a number of sessions around mind control, around happiness, etc. And today we will go a little into the topic of depression, right? Um, of course, depression is a very, very, very broad topic. We will just focus or filter down to some aspects of depression, right? The caveat is that whenever one is down with depression, it's important for this person to actually seek professional advice, right? It could be due to a number of factors, and therefore you can't just say that maybe it's due to us not controlling, not being able to control our mind, etc. There could be some genetic issue, there could be some hormonal issue in ourselves, etc. So it's very important for us to engage in consulting a professional practitioner in this area. But for the for today's session, we will really look at the expectations of society. We will look at the expectations which we have set on ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, we are not able to meet those expectations. And as a result, we get into this cycle of depression, right? So that's going to be the topic for today. So, what is depression, right? It's an internal state of suffering due to a locked up state of emotion. Many a times when one is in depression, the only word which they use is, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. But they're not really able to express, right, how they are feeling, their behavior. Um, they're not able to really express their thoughts, right? So depression is essentially a feeling of being powerless. And the slide mentions that it's because of the lower self overpowering the higher self. Essentially, what it means is that, we have this tendency of either thinking positively about a situation or negatively about a situation. So, the state of having the lower self overpowering the higher self, it is essentially we thinking about negative repercussions, we thinking that things may really go southwards, we essentially feeling negative about the entire scenario. Since we begin to think negatively about a scenario, that also invokes this feeling of powerlessness, right? And it could be due to many, many, many reasons. One of the reason could be we feel powerless because we have, like, really made ourselves, um, to strive for unrealistic expectations. We want to take giant leaps. And when we are not able to do this, we begin to lose faith in ourselves. Sometimes the world could also be a place of misery, right? Many a times, society has set unrealistic expectations of us. So it's important for us to actually set ourselves up for success. What do I mean by that? Essentially, it's important for us to realize that it's not always going to be possible for us to achieve those crazy goals which we have set for ourselves. Point number one. And sometimes we can engage in small wins, right? When we engage in small wins or setting a series of small goals, then the moment we actually reach a goal, it also amps up, right? It amps up our feeling. It just gives us so much of additional confidence, and that could be an impetus to move on to the next small goal, right? And these are some ways in which we can remove this feeling of powerlessness. And another definition of depression, or another way of looking at depression, could be it's a persistent feeling of sadness, hopelessness, or a lack of interest or pleasure in activities which we once enjoyed. Right. So I'll just take a pause here and ask you, right? Do you know of anyone who is going through a state of depression like this? Is there anyone who would like to share? Or maybe we are going through this. Hi, Salvi. Nice to see you again. Right? And it's a common phenomena, right? It's a common phenomena today. There are times when I feel, I mean, these are like, it's really stressful. There's just so much happening in my mind, right? It gets me into a state of depression. But before we look at ways in which, we can solve this problem, let's just take a deeper look into what are some of the causes of depression. It could be due to genetics. It could be biological, sometimes changing hormones or a hormonal imbalance in ourselves. I remember when my wife gave birth to my first child, immediately after giving birth, there was a major hormonal change in her body, and she was just continuously crying. And I was like a nut. I didn't even know the reason why this was happening. And I was like, begin to, wonder, why is she behaving in this way. I got it all wrong until I started reading more and more around this. So, biological changes in our body, sometimes when we get into a new environment, or sometimes when, there are some psychological factors which are affecting us, right? So, it's just a persistent condition which can significantly impair our daily functioning. The more we think about this, the more we feel that, we are allowing the negative emotions to overtake the possibility of positive emotions in ourselves. um, the more this will actually impair the functioning and the quality of life. So it's really important for us to actually seek professional help. And there are treatments like, psychotherapy, medications. Sometimes it could be as simple as just a lifestyle change, right? Maybe just engaging more in regular yoga practices, regular exercise, partaking in a healthy diet, and also surrounding yourself with people who are much, much more positive about life, surrounding yourself with people who really care about you, surrounding yourself with people you know, who just take pleasure in life, that can help us in a big, big, big way, right? We cannot underestimate what a lifestyle change can do to us, right? Okay. Any questions? Selvi, Hui, Poha? All right. So this is all looking great. Okay. Environmental changes, like, sometimes, when people are exposed to violence, like what is happening in some parts of the Middle East, in Ukraine, etc., right? Environmental factors like neglect, abuse, sometimes when people go through a state of poverty, all of this can actually increase the likelihood of depression. Sometimes major life events such as, the passing of a loved one, when couples go through a difficult phase in their marriage, a job loss, and all of this can actually really trigger these depressive episodes, right? And psychological factors could be like, chronic stress, trauma, sometimes even childhood trauma. If this is not treated or if this is not addressed, this can all, um, continuously haunt us with this psychology of depression, right? This negative thinking patterns, this low self-esteem, this very, very pessimistic outlooks. This is all depression, right? Sometimes even chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart diseases, chronic pain conditions, they can all cause depression as a side effect, right? So, many a times we may just use the word depression very, very loosely. Oh, I'm feeling depressed today. It's much, much more than just feeling down or having a bad day, right? Depression is really a persistent condition which can really significantly impair our daily functioning and our quality of life, right? So it's important for us to once again seek the appropriate treatment and support. So I like this quote very much. Depression can actually be a prison where you are both the suffering prisoner and the cruel jailer. The cruel jailer is actually the mind, right, which keeps on haunting you. The mind keeps on haunting you that things are never going to get better, right? And therefore, the body then reacts to this stimulus, right? So, this particular quote is essentially just referring to one type of depression, right? So, while we are depressed, when we are persistently feeling very, very low, even if there are attempts to snap out of it, the mind will act like a jailer, convincing us of, complete hopelessness and a sorry state. This is really a trick of the mind. Oh, I'm a failure. Or nobody loves me. Or nothing is going to work out, right? So it's essentially the lower self is acting up, right? And subduing the higher self. So the mind puts us really in a jail kind of condition. And the mind will just keep us there, right? The mind will just keep us there. And if you do not understand the construct of the body, it will really make it more difficult to come out of this paradigm. What do I mean by this? So modern science can't explain this, right? The modern science cannot explain this phenomena of the mind, the subtle body, etc. But if you look at the Vedas, if you look at ancient wisdom, it explains to you that, you are just beyond this physical body. Actually, we have three bodies. Right? Maybe let me just go directly to a particular slide which explains this even better. Right. So we have three bodies, right? We have the gross material body, which is made up of earth, water, fire, and ether. And therefore, we have the various sense organs and the various sense perceptions, right? That's our gross body or our material body. But we also have a subtle body, which consists the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, right? So the mind is nothing but just a repository of our experiences. And the mind can dictate to us what we need to do, how should we behave, what are the activities which we want to engage in, etc. All right. So the mind is like a monkey. It's just moving, moving, moving. Oh, I want to eat this. I want to do this. I want to run here. I want to read a book. No, no, no. I want to get to Netflix. No, I think I just want to get onto Facebook. No, no, no. I think Instagram is a better social media. The mind will just keep on dictating. All right. And if you're not able to control the mind, it will create havoc. So, how do you go about controlling the mind? The mind can be only controlled if we are able to execute that intelligence to control it, to subdue it. All right. So the intelligence is essentially that higher order power, right, which can control the mind. The intelligence is the discerning factor which we have, the discerning parameters which we inherently have in ourselves. So if the mind is telling us, no, I want to go for a drink, I want to smoke right now, I want to get to the internet, right? Our intelligence should be so strong to tell the mind, hey, mind, you just behave, calm down, control yourself, just relax. Don't engage in these activities, oh mind, because it will create havoc for you later on. That's what the intelligence is all about. All right. And the false ego essentially is this perception that you are this physical body, you are the sense organs. But there is a third body called the spiritual body, which is the spiritual spark or the soul. Okay, we have the gross body, the subtle body, and we have the spiritual body or the spiritual soul. And the scriptures explain to us that actually we are not this physical body. The physical body is just a covering. We are a spirit soul on a human lead journey. We do not know what we were previously, but that spirit soul had existed since time immemorial. All right. Sometimes we are given a body of a cow, sometimes the body of a cockroach, sometimes the body of a donkey, sometimes the body of a fish. All right. And this time round, we are given the body of a human. And the human body is amazing because the human body also has that discerning power, that intelligence to make the right decision, that intelligence to control the mind. Okay. So many a times, right, depression is because we are not able to control our mind. Right? We are not able to control the mind. So we set crazy expectations on ourselves, expectations from others, right? Expectations from others. Sometimes we as parents also set crazy expectations on our children, you know, and when they are not able to achieve those expectations, they get into a depression, and we also get into a depression, right? So, comparing ourselves with others, that can also cause depression. Having this comparing mentality or this insecurity, this can just trigger unrealistic expectations of ourselves, which leads to this feeling of depression. Right? Comparing ourselves to others is a race you can never ever win. Right? Sometimes they say Einstein is the one who actually said this beautiful phrase. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, the poor fish will keep on living its whole life believing that it's stupid. What do you think? Somehow the universe has given each of us a unique quality, a unique differentiator, a unique strength. We do not sometimes understand what our strength is. And then we begin to compare ourselves, all right, to others, where the other party's strength may be standing out, but we are not able to see our own strength. We are beginning to compare ourselves to the other party based on that particular quality which the other party has an outstanding amount of. Okay. So it's important for us to understand that each of us have a different construct. Each of us is a genius, right? I may be amazing in climbing a tree. Hui may be amazing in doing yoga exercises, right? Po Hua might be an amazing teacher. Selvi might be an amazing management guru, right? Can we can we just you know literally compare ourselves to others? We can't, because each of us has a different construct, right? So what I'll be focusing on right now is going to be just situational depression. All right. Taking away, the the genetic kind of depression, or um, the, s- the psychological kind of depression. No, no, no. That is all beyond the scope of today's presentation. We're just going to be focusing on situational depression, which is essentially a short-term stress-related type of depression that can develop after experiencing a traumatic event or a significant change in our life, environmental changing, right? And in the context of comparisons and unreal expectations, it might be triggered by factors such as social comparison, unrealistic expectations of ourselves, and sometimes even social media influence, right? So let's have a group discussion right now, right? Po Hua, Selvi, Hui, myself, and I can't see who is the other participant. Would you be able to unmute yourself and maybe introduce yourself? Maybe even switch on your camera. So I know
By the
there's
way, the session is recorded, but none of our face will be shown in the recording.
okay, no problems if you're not comfortable. But you know, do you compare yourselves to others? Yeah, Hui, what do you think? Or
Definitely.
definitely, yeah.
I'm born in a very competitive year
Okay,
where there's a lot of more children than usual.
okay. Is that a dragon year?
Yeah, the dragon year.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's very like I'm conditioned to always compete.
Mm, okay, okay. A little bit of comparison is fine, right? I think it's healthy. Otherwise, it can also put us in a state of complacency. But too much of comparison can be really unhealthy, right? And what were some of the results of such comparison? Did you feel down, or did you feel like, yeah, it's like an unending possibility of reaching that particular state?
I think for me, it's more like being in the rat race. Like even if you
Okay,
score A, even if I score A, it's not good enough because someone has a higher total score.
okay, okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
endless rat race.
right. And in the last few years, how have you circumvented this psychology or this way of thinking?
I think the most basic thing I do is telling myself that everyone has their own pace to go. Maybe not just even like moving into adulthood, moving into like progressing in life, right? I mean, we don't compare result anymore, but we compare like where are you in your life right now? How
Mm,
much are you earning? At what stage are you in your life? Are you getting married? Are you having children? Uh, and it can get really intense if I mentally just in my mind keep having this dialogue, comparing myself to other people or my peers.
mm.
So the most basic thing that I personally practice is telling myself that everyone has their own journey and own pace to go in life.
Very nice. And and I think what we can do is, what is in our control is giving our best, right? It's not the results which actually finally matter. It is more the process. What do I mean by that? There are times when, we can give our very, 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 very best, but there are so many other conditions. There are so many other conditions which are beyond our control. For example, I have a sales role. There are times when I give, like, the best proposal, the most competitive pricing. Um, I have the best, amazing relationship with the client, but they still decide to go for someone else. It was really tough in my initial years in the sales career. But I begin to then tell my team members and my bosses too that we did all that we could. At least we don't have to feel bad that we did not try hard. We did everything. We tried very, very hard. Our proposals were like state of the art, but there are some things which are just beyond our control, right? And the scriptures also actually explain this, that we are just one third of the equation, right? I can desire something, but then, right, whether I get it or not will also depend on my karma. What have I done previously which gives me the right to actually own this, or give me the right of this success, right? I mean, we are a population of what, 5 billion people, right? What gives me the right out of these 5 billion people to have this, right? So the second condition is our karma. What good activities did we engage in which allows us to enjoy this particular result? And the third component is essentially Mother Nature facilitating this because of the second condition, right? So I desire, right? And then um, the universe will say yes or no, this person should get it. And then finally, Mother Nature takes over to orchestrate it happening for me or not happening for me. That's what the scriptures actually explain, right? Thanks, Hui, for being vulnerable and sharing this. I think all of us benefited from this, right? So when we look at another person's life, there's a tendency for us to, amplify sometimes their fortune. Sometimes we can feel envious about them. We can likely feel depressed. We envy other person's wealth, beauty, education, family, and we begin to sometimes ask ourselves, why them and not me, right? And we begin to judge ourselves too. And this can be really toxic, it can be debilitating, and we get disconnected from reality. Because all of us have our individual journeys, as what Hui has just mentioned. As spirit souls, all of us have our individual journeys. Yeah? We have inhabited in so many bodies in the past. Yeah? So many human bodies, possibly other living entity bodies, and therefore resulting in the current psychophysical conditions we find ourselves in. And from a spiritual perspective, we are not judged, but we are continuously loved by the universe. So this is really an earth school which keeps on teaching us, which just keeps on teaching us. In our previous classes, we have actually explained that at any moment we should be just expressing gratitude, right? We express gratitude for what we get, we express gratitude for what we lose, right? We express gratitude for, even if something is so difficult in our life, because there's always a message which the universe is giving us, right? And what is in our control is, number one, how we look at it, how our mind processes it, and the mind processes it by the intelligence which is actually giving the mind the direction, right? Even in a most difficult condition, we can always ourselves, what can I learn from this particular episode? Yeah, it's easy for me to say this, right? When the rubber hits the road, we can't think like that. But in a calm mind, we need to just keep on asking ourselves, what is the earth school trying to teach us? Right? Okay, so let's move on. So each of us is different. Each of us has a different construct. So the Bhagavad Gita, or the scriptures, explain that we can deliver ourselves with the help of the mind. If we have the intelligence of controlling the mind, we can deliver ourselves. But if we do not have the intelligence of controlling and subduing the mind, then we can degrade ourselves. So the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul, and the mind can also be the enemy, right? So which is the factor which decides whether the mind is the friend or the enemy? Selvi, would you like to try? Which is the factor? The mind can be your best friend. The mind can also be your enemy.
I'm not so sure. Maybe the false ego,
It's the intelligence,
intelligence.
the discerning power to tell the monkey mind, calm down. The condition is not so bad. All right. The mind will tell us, um, do this, let's do this, let's engage in these activities, etc. We need to spiritualize our mind through the process of meditation. Once the We need to spiritualize our intelligence through the process of meditation, through the process of chanting, etc. Once we have spiritualized our intelligence, then the intelligence can actually subdue the mind and tell the mind that no, behave. Until the intelligence, okay, is not sharpened through spirituality, through the process of chanting, through the process of meditation, until the intelligence is not spiritualized, it's going to be really difficult to tame the mind. Once the intelligence is spiritualized, then the mind will also be spiritualized because of the association. And once the mind is spiritualized, then we can control our habits. We can even tell the mind that the situation is not so bad. All right. We don't have to get into this mode of depression. We don't have to get the lower self or this negative emotion to take over the positive self. Okay. So once again, we are a spiritual entity. We are a spiritual spark. We are the Atma or the soul, which is caged in a physical body, right? Which is caged in a physical body. At the same time, the scriptures explain to us that we have this subtle body which consists of the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. All right. If we engage, all right, in sensual pleasure, right, then, then essentially we are playing in the realm of the gross body, right? All our senses, right? But if we engage in pleasure of the mind or the pleasure of the intellect, right? It is not going to be the same as the pleasure of the spirit soul. Because this intellectual pleasure, this mental pleasure, this egoistic pleasure, or the sensual pleasure, they are all still at the material platform. What do I mean by that? Today, I will be happy with one pack of whiskey. In time to come, that is not giving me enough sensual pleasure. I will need 2 packs of whiskey. I will need 3 cigarettes, right? Why? Because this is material in nature. Just like the economics rule, right? The law of economics states that it is the law of diminishing returns, right? Similarly, right? Whatever you are enjoying today will not give you the same enjoyment in time to come. You will need to up the game. Today I have a Hyundai, but if I'm just getting this material or sensual pleasure from my Hyundai, in time to come, once I see others having a Mercedes, a BMW, a Bentley, I will realize that no, I need that. Why? Because I'm just so attached to this material happiness which is given by these senses, right? So, regardless of whether it is the material happiness due to a sensual pleasure or intellectual or mental or egoistic pleasure, this is all subject to the law of diminishing returns. But the scriptures explain that spiritual bliss is actually the real happiness. Because we are a spiritual entity. If we are a spiritual entity, how can we be satisfied with material happiness? No. Since we are a spiritual entity, we are a spirit soul, we need to be, right, nourished by spiritual happiness. So how does that spiritual happiness happen? The spiritual happiness happens when we can reconnect with our true self, when we can reconnect with God or universe, when we serve others, right? When we serve others, because you are also serving the spirit soul of another entity, that is when you are unlocking this spiritual happiness. Okay. Salvi, does it make sense? Okay, wonderful. Right. So when we engage in meditation, when we engage in spiritual activities, when we engage in chanting the Lord's name, when we engage in kirtan, right? All of this actually will provide us with the eternal spiritual pleasure, right? So once again, who controls the mind? The intelligence can control the mind. So this is the hierarchy of the subtle senses. The driver of the chariot is the intelligence. The reins are the mind, and the senses are the horses. Okay? And you, as a spirit soul, you are just the passenger. So if the driver is able to control the reins, then there's a high possibility of, therefore, controlling the senses. So the intelligence need to be so spiritualized that it can easily control the mind. Once the mind is controlled, then you can easily control the senses. The scriptures actually explain that if one who has control is mind, then the super soul, or the universe, can be attained. Okay, or God can be reached once we have actually controlled the mind. Okay, so once again, we started off by looking at this topic of depression, situational depression, primarily not the genetic, not the psychological, but really the situational depression due to is really caused by unrealistic expectation, all right, of this material conception, this comparison with others, this gap between expectation and reality. All of this, right, will then finally result in us losing faith in ourselves. And then it's a downward spiral of depression. We lose trust in ourselves just simply by creating unrealistic expectation. So we need to start managing our expectations. Expectations about what? Firstly, about our abilities. Number two, that we have a strength. We need to somehow understand where our strength lies. And then, okay, in fact, there are some assessment tools called the Strength Finder, right? These are amazing, which doesn't look at the weaknesses only, but it just looks at the strengths. And the entire coaching in this process is around strengthening the strength, right? Bringing your strengths to the next level. Right? Okay, so let's look at this. Life is difficult, right? So M. Scott Peck, he wrote this amazing, um, reality, in my opinion. He says life is difficult. That's a great truth. Why is it difficult? Birth, getting into this material world, is a difficult process. Ask the mother, ask the child. The poor child gets, you know, is born in this material world crying. Right? Birth, death is a real painful process, not only for the person who is dying, but for the relatives. Old age, look at my white hair. I tell you, it's such a painful process. Stuff which I could do earlier on, I can't do that now. Right? So birth, death, old age, and disease. I've got high blood pressure. My cholesterol levels are high. I do not know what's going to be next. So these are all painful processes. So life is difficult. That's a great truth. One of the greatest truth. But you know what? Once we truly see this truth, once we understand this, once we have set our expectations, then we will actually transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then actually life is no longer difficult because you have already accepted it. The fact that life is difficult no longer matters. Okay. So M. Scott Peck spoke about this in The Road Less Traveled, an amazing book. So, this world, a lot of people say, oh, no, 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 you should think positively, etc. But no, the fact is that this material world is a place of misery. It's a place of misery, but also it is a temporary place. If we are able to transcend this, then we will not need to be born in this difficult place in future, right? And just because these are conditions of misery in the world, we don't have to stay miserable. Okay, we don't have to stay miserable. Once we have spiritualized our intelligence, the intelligence can actually take control of the mind and tell the mind that no, there's so many other good things you can actually do about this. All right. So the goal of taking to medication is feeling real happiness. The goal of taking to, you know, spiritual activities is to understand the real happiness, which is beyond this material pleasure. All right. So we be in this world, we understand that it's a difficult world. At the same time, we do not need to be of the world. What it means is we understand our spiritual essence, that we are not the material body. We are a spirit soul. And therefore, what do? We keep on engaging in spiritual activities which strengthen our intelligence and therefore allows us to control our mind. All right. It can be done. And this is a process. This is a process where we will keep on falling and falling and falling. It's not going to be easy. All right. Mind control is going to be really tough, but it can be done. Every time we fall, what is the concept of resilience? We fall, but then we stand up again. We keep on rising every time we fail. All right. So the mind will tell us something. It's okay if we are weak, we may do something, but then we acknowledge the fact that, hey, actually, I should not have done it. All right. Then we get into this mode of resilience. We just get into the mode of resilience. So once again, take small steps every day. All right. Consider, physiotherapy. All right. Um, Sometimes, I there was once my daughter was in Iceland. She came back. While she was there, she had a frostbite on her finger. Right, she was playing too much in the snow, and she had a frostbite. She sought medical help over there. Fortunately, her finger was saved. She came back, and then, the entire finger was like not mobile, it was just stuck. And then she went for physiotherapy. Slowly, 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 it began to work. All right. And then she got the entire movement of her digit, her finger back. Right. So that's what mind control is all about. We were bound to fail, right? But that doesn't stop us. We build this resilience. How? By strengthening the intelligence to control the mind. All right. So these are incremental steps to trust ourselves and to trust the process. All right. Incremental steps to do something positive. And once again, remember, don't just overpromise ourselves. Don't just set too high expectations. We need to be realistic also. Okay. And don't compare ourselves to others. It is just the start of a downward spiral. Okay. So with that, um, just to sum up, we got into this topic of situational depression, which is really due to comparing ourselves to others, setting unrealistic expectation, being harsh to ourselves, right? And and also allowing the monkey mind to control us. We also spoke about how meditation as a process how serving others, how japa, which is chanting of the holy names, can actually spiritualize our intelligence, and therefore intelligence being a higher ordinate entity, sorry, being a higher order entity, can actually then control and spiritualize our mind. Okay, so with that, I hand it over to Hui. I'm so sorry, I will have to leave the office. It's 8 o'clock. I'm still in the office right now. I'll have to rush and run some errands. And Hui, over to you.
Okay. Anyone has any questions or any comments that you like to make? Any sharing? Okay, if not, Pradeep, you could make a move first.
Okay,
We
sure.
can catch up with you later. So